everyone to today's episode of Celestia on Air, Deciphering STEM, the podcast of Set Celestia, the Astronomy, Astrophysics, and Space Executive Club of BITS program. We are your hosts. I am Yashi.
And I am Abdul. Today with us, we have Professor G. Ravindra Kumar. He is a laser physicist and a senior professor of nuclear and atomic physics at TIFR Mumbai. He was awarded the Shanti Swarup Bhatnagar Prize for Science and Technology, one of the highest Indian science awards, and it's also the recipient of the Infosys Award in 2015. We're glad to have you here, Professor.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here and, going back to BITS, where it all began.
Yes. So a lot of you might not know, but Professor Ravindra has been a student of BITS Pilani before going on to do his PhD from IIT Kanpur. So, Professor, can you start by telling us about your years in college? Just in general, how was the experience and how did it shape you to, in your future for getting your PhD?
Okay. So, firstly, I think we should probably lower our guards a little. Don't call me professor. I think in the interest of, in tune with the modern times, call me just Ravi. That's what all the people call me. My students here call me Ravi. So you should call me Ravi too. Well, you are asking me to look back many decades ago. And I should tell you that looking back, I feel that BITS was and will probably be ahead of its time. When we entered, it was a batch of 400 people who were admitted to the first year. And we were all supposed to graduate into different branches as we moved on, right? Different streams and so on and so forth. And one thing that I would like to, you can say so much about your undergraduate place and you can go on and on till the other person just gets tired of listening to your wonderful time that you had and so on, all your friends, teachers. But one thing that I'll tell you is that I think it had a wonderful culture. It had a very nice academic system, and I'm sure it still has. But that I will find out from you guys. Very sort of structured courses, a structured program, wonderful books. The content of the courses was very well defined and the books that were prescribed were very great. And of course, the professors tried to teach us. I don't know how far they succeeded, I must admit. But I should tell you that the peer group, and this is what I tell everybody who is willing to listen to me, that in a university, you of course learn from everything around, your teachers, the environment, so many other interactions that you have. But the biggest teachers, the true teachers of, undergraduate days or any other system like that are your peers. And I must say that we had terrific peer group. And I went from a small town in Andhra Pradesh, which is still Andhra Pradesh, by the way. And then when I went there, I hadn't actually traveled out of, even out of my small circle, a little bit away from my town. So I suddenly land up, I travel all the way to Delhi and then take a bus and go to Pilani. And I see all these people who seem totally different to me. Over the next few years, they became great friends. They became a wonderful, a group that we all love to remember even to this day. And these were all the pre-internet, pre-Facebook, pre-WhatsApp days, mercifully. So we had this small village called Pilani. And then we had these guys, about 2,000 people in the campus. And there was pretty little else. Pilani is a very small village. And it's a lovely place, with lots of camels and peacocks, but it's all surrender. It's a village. So we had only one another, to talk to fall back on, the ones who took care of us. And I think it is a peer group that teaches you amazing things. They teach you your own subjects too, because that's what you run. When you don't understand something, you run to the guy in next room, and then hopefully he knows, and if he doesn't, then together you run to somebody else. And it was a delightful experience. And in fact, to me, it looks like it was just the other day. I remember my room numbers, the wing that I stayed in, and who were the first guys I met. So it was a delightful group, and it was, I would say, the best teachers that I ever had was this wonderful peer group. They came from all over, all kinds of backgrounds, from the best schools in India to very normal schools. And as we moved on, we sort of normalized ourselves to one another. The guys who were much more accomplished or much more talented, much brainier, sort of helped out the guys who were lacking in those departments. And they always tried to, we stood for each other. We sort of, we became a very, very close-knit group. And those friendships are sustained till today. And I would say on the academics part, as I said, BITS was, many of the ideas that BITS thought of first were later, they became later very commonplace, or they were adopted by other institutions. The dual degree scheme, for example. And the other things were about the fact that you could take, in the true sense of, enabling education, you could take courses from other, branches, you could mix and match, you could do all those things. I think in that sense, BITS was far ahead of its time. Though at that time, we felt that, why did I have to do that? Why I am here to do something? Why are they forcing me to do this? All of us had cribs about biology. They made me do a general biology course, which today I regret I hadn't done more biology. Actually, I should have learned more biology. But at that time, it was like, why are they making me do all this? This is just not right. I'm here to do one particular thing, and they don't know anything. Young people are, and they were, they are, and they probably will always be, always critical of the things that are the status quo. And that's one thing good about young people, because they change things. But in our way, in our own way, we were rebels in some sense, saying that, you're making me do things that I don't really have to do, because I'm going to specialize in that. And what use is? And one of the, some of the best things, they made me do actually engineering practice. They made me do engineering drawing. We had workshop practice. These were all amazing things. And those skills have actually proved much more than what I thought, they would mean to me. And one of the best courses I had, which I use very, very regularly in my present career, is report writing and comprehension. I don't know if you still have that course. That is the first time I learned about a phrase which I remember till today. It's called the fog index. Do you know what is a fog index?
The referencing, the citation.
If you read a passage and you cannot make any sense out of it, it has got a very high fog index. It's like, you're seeing through the fog. You don't know what the guy wants to say. So we had paragraphs like that, and we were made to see, how can you write this better? And one of the skills that everybody must learn is to communicate well, communicate orally, and more importantly, communicate in writing. And I dare say that was a course that actually taught me that, I thought we could all write, all of us were good writers, but that taught me exactly what to write, how to write, how much to write, and whom to address. Right? When you're addressing somebody, how to write appropriately. So we had a thin little book. I forget the name of the book. And we went through the whole book, and we had lectures. And most of the guys would say, oh, this is a class that I can afford to miss. But I think they missed a lot if they missed that course. So in sum, it was, I think, a very well structured system of education. It had wonderful courses, flexibility. It had very nice books. G.B. Thomas calculus, you guys still use? I don't know. We had the G.B. Thomas book, which was split into 2 parts, and it became Calculus 1 and 2. And my God, they made us do 7 courses in maths, from Calculus 1 all the way to numerical analysis. And it looked like heavy at that time, but I think they're really giving us a solid grounding. No matter how anybody felt about the course at that time. So this is the solid grounding, 7 courses in maths, 3 courses or 4 courses in physics, 3 courses in chemistry. And then they taught us, it was a 5-year program, unlike the now truncated 4-year program that you guys have. And so there was plenty of time. Then there was this practice school, which was an eye-opener at the end of the 3rd year. The PS1, I went to the National Aeronautical Laboratory in Bangalore. And when I look back, I say, oh my God, I saw all these things there. At that time, I didn't realize. So wonderful exposure again. And then for my PS2, I was in a company in Calcutta. And that is again a great experience. So my point is that when you're going through all these things, you probably don't realize their true value. And you realize it as you go through your careers, whatever the career that you choose. You go through your career and you realize everything that you touch there has meant something later. So, and I still, of course, remember many teachers from there. I'm sure they have all passed on, and they must be at different places. This was a long time ago, but we all had, of course, we had fun. We had Fatta cricket. I still know. I don't know if you still get play that. We had to invent our own games too, because we were just a bunch of 2,000 people in a small village, and pre-internet days, pre-computer.
Are you still in contact with your friends?
Well, we had a 25-year reunion, and I was very impressed. 117 people landed. I think may not be, probably we were not the biggest batch that came back to the campus, but we were probably among the biggest. And these guys came from all over the globe, and it was a delight to see how much of Silicon Valley have occupied and where all they have gone in the world. I mean, the biggest entrepreneurs that I saw, these were all, already we had reached a certain stage in life where people were CEOs and people had started their own companies. And so it was a great thing was that we went back and saw, that what we did long time ago and what it meant. And so we sort of reconnected. After that, of course, I am not on social media. That may be a surprise to you. So I haven't maintained much of a contact, but I do know where to find people if I want them. So I'm sure they do know too.
I mean, that is fascinating. Like course structure has evolved a lot, as you said. Like it's a 4-year course than a 5-year that you had. I think the maths we have like now 3 courses rather than 7. I mean, we still go to complex analysis rather than numerical analysis. What was the other 2 physics courses that you had?
I think we had probably classical mechanics. I mean, Resting and Halliday was the book. So that was again split into 2 parts. We did the mechanics part first, then we had the electricity and magnetism in the second course. We had a course in vibrations and waves. We had course, I now cannot recall but we had 4 courses at least.
Classical mechanics was for everyone.
Yeah, it was, all these were for everyone. So we had this, the notion of a broad-based curriculum has now come back. I don't know if I'm right in saying this, as a liberal arts education into Indian universities. It's always been, I think BITS was modeled on MIT. They had a MIT Ford Foundation contact that time. That was touted as the big thing. And BITS and IIT Kanpur were the 2 Indian institutions which took a lot of guidance from those MIT Ford Foundation programs. And the course structure was actually modeled along courses in the US, I guess, and in a liberal arts sense, because it is not just, science and maths heavy. I did a course on contemporary Indian literature. I did a course on Gandhian thought. I did a course on, we had a bouquet of courses which was truly broad-based. When 5 years became 4 years, and trends have changed over the decades. So I'm sure BITS had to adapt to the present time. And so there must have been significant changes. But I guess the ethos probably has remained the same. And that's something that you guys can, think about and see if it has. The grounding was solid. How much of the ground we actually owned was dependent on, we of course felt that there were too many courses. There were just lots and lots of courses. There were quizzes every week. There were surprise quizzes. I think the tradition still stays. I mean, you had an exam between 8:30 to 9:30 and a class after that, or 8 to 9 and a class. And people are exhausted after the previous night. They were just sort of, getting ready for the exam. And after that, there's a class. So invariably, the class would see a lower density. But if you miss something in a system like that, you miss a couple of classes and then you fall behind. So we had to, some of us did all sorts of things. Of course, we should not assume that we were all ideal students. We were not. But so this did not make evaluation a special thing in your life. It made it as a part of your life, a quiz followed by a class, by a set of classes till lunchtime. And then maybe another test in the afternoon. And so there was no period for there was no mid-sem exam break and there was no end-sem exams. This is something that I saw in other places. So it was, in a sense, trying to give, and this, another thing to mention is this notion of a makeup exam, which is still there, I believe, or
it's still there.
You're not well or something like that, or you have to go out, then you get a makeup exam. But then as it turned out, what people did was that they said, I'm not prepared, so I will take a makeup. But invariably, the makeup exam was much tougher than the regular exam. So there you are. So you should not do that. So, and the fact that relative grading is something that I learned there. Well, most other places say that 80 to 90 is some grade, right? But in BITS, at least in those times and perhaps even now, if the course was very tough, 60 was an A, right? And the average 40 was C or something like that, and 50 was B. So you had this Gaussian which people would display and then say, you can find out where you are. And that leads to either a celebration or sort of, uh, a bad mood after you see where you are on that curve. But this is something, I think it was all these components. If you see them separately, they might not mean much. But the integration of all these things at a time when the country was just not prepared for it. There were probably a couple of other institutions, and I'm not sure which they were. They did push this, and eventually, I think after our batch or a couple of batches after that, they had to adapt to the changing social pressures. So they relaxed. They did several things in a sense to suit the changing expectations of the Indian environment. Let's put it that way. But all in all, I think it had several interesting features, which have, I believe, which are now coming back in different forms. They're being rediscovered in some way. And this notion of, bits off-campus stuff was also something that we used to feel very funny about, in the sense, what is all this? But now their off-campus programs have also succeeded. I think they're succeeding tremendously. And the latest, I believe, is that they're opening a school of management here in Mumbai. Is this what I hear? It's still there, MMS, Master of Management. We had a 5-year Master of Management studies in
I don't think we have that anymore.
Yeah, I think it's.
I don't know how much of the daughter campuses have adopted the BITS profile, but the parent campus certainly had this Master of Management Studies, and they had this MSc Tech Instrumentation, MSc Tech Computer Science. You could telescope. They had real nice words, which would make you feel amazed about how they were thought of. You could, spend 2 years, 2 or 3 years, and then instead of waiting to complete your bachelor's, you could telescope into a master's program in computer science or instrumentation, right? Meaning that you don't have to do all the rest of the courses. You got a grounding now. Now you can, if you feel, you can branch out into something more specialized. Or you could, of course, continue like the traditional engineering, sciences, and do all that stuff. So it was a very, very, at least I found it, looking back, I find it ahead of its time in what it wanted to do.
Speaking of the degree structure, you went from mechanical to physics, right? In your college years. So, do you want to talk about why? What was your attraction towards physics? Or why did you make that change?
No, actually, as I told you, we were all admitted in one stream of 400 people, and then different people branched out. There was, of course, competition for lots of things. All people looking for one branch or something. So then they came up, and there was a lot of unrest about people who did not get what they wanted. So they came up with this notion of a dual degree to cater to people who may have wanted to spend more time to get an engineering degree and a sciences degree. But my motivation was that I told you that I came across some very brilliant minds in my first year, and I was sort of dwarfed by their brilliance in the sense that these were exceptionally, there was very bright kids, in my batch, national talent search scholars, and they were treated, very specially. Everybody knew them, that how bright, how smart they were. And they would just talk about very interesting things. And, in the first year, you're doing all these physics courses, which if you are somewhat, in the mean of the class, no matter what you were in your school before, you tend to struggle with some of the ideas, and then you take help from your friends, peers, and then they tell you more interesting things. So you start learning more and more stuff. And I challenge any one of you to say that you didn't find physics exciting in the first year. I'm sure you did. So I'm answering the question, right? And they talk about, and I should tell you one more thing. We had this course, absolutely unusual, called Concepts in Science, right? It had things from physics, from chemistry, from lots of things. It was an introduction to science. So we had this notion of Concepts in Science, for which and BITS used to do this, that they used to give cyclostyle notes for different courses that they are taught of. Those days of pre-electronic PDFs and all that, which you could upload. So they would give us cyclostyle sheets. Cyclostyling, I don't think any of you have heard. It was pre-Xerox, pre-photocopy. So there was these cyclostyle machines. The guy would make the notes, the teacher and the set of teachers And they gave us this bound book of concepts in science, which was heavy in this physical sense and also in the unusual combination of subjects that were there inside. They taught us relativity, they taught us so many other things. Then, yeah, we also had this course on, I think, modern physics by Beiser. We had, apart from you were asking me, classical mechanics, electricity, magnetism. We also had course in modern physics based on Arthur Beiser's book. And then we had Vibrations Waves by French. I still have that book on my shelf here from those times. Right?
We still have that book on our shelf.
It's an MIT series, right? In fact, I think I have even preserved my Resident Halliday from those days, right? And I have preserved all my books here right on my shelf. So this concepts in science was something, it just was very unusual. And it used to confuse us. It also used to excite us. That they were treating science, they were telling us lots of things in science, perhaps with the idea, I don't know what their intentions were, that we have to see everything as an integrated thing. It is not just, even in physics, we say that is heat, thermodynamics, this is electricity and magnetism. I think they just wanted to break down all those notions, or at least to me, it looks like that right now. So they just given something. How would you think about a problem? So they gave you concepts in science. So while doing all this and by being challenged by this much smarter, very, very brilliant guys all around us, and whom we used to sort of look at, in awe, wow, this guy is that scholar, that guy is this, he was this rank holder, and all that, how teenagers are, right? And so we probably got discussing more and more. It was also a challenge that I didn't understand as much as those guys did. So I used to feel that I must learn all this. How come these guys know and I don't know? So we started reading. And one of those books from that time, referred to me by one of my friends, is a book called Physics for the Inquiring Mind. And I find that there's a copy available even now on Amazon. And I will send you, I think you can even download it now. It's called, I think it's by Eric Rogers or something, Physics for the Inquiring Mind. So it was again a fat book, big A4 sized, not the normal book size, but the A4 sized book, a fat one of some 600, 700 pages or more. And I faithfully carried it in my suitcase to read during the holidays. Not that I read much, but the intention was that this book had all amazing things and very nicely written. So I had to figure out lots of stuff from there. And that book stayed on my shelf in the hostel for a few semesters. I would reissue it every time I had to return it to the library. And again, another thing that I should say, they had a wonderful library of books at that time. And they also had a very facilitating, enabling kind of environment. For example, none of us could buy the books. This is all way into the past when the money was not much. Right? The salaries were very low of a typical parent who would send his child to Pilani. And the best bills were really, really low. You'd be amazed to see how much they were. And so they bought this Thomas book in multiple copies, hundreds of them, and they divided that into two. So for Calculus 1, we had G.B. Thomas 1 and G.B. Thomas 2. So for G.B. Thomas 2 was for the second year Calculus 2. So what they did was they gave us half the book for a princely sum of 5 rupees per semester. For 5 rupees per semester, I could rent that book and return it at the end of the semester. So they did this, all these things were enabling in so many ways. They knew that otherwise you couldn't buy the books, but you still had to have access to them. So it was sort of equitable, fair play system. And I found that very, very interesting, that they would just buy 500 copies or 400 copies and then give it for a very, small amount of money as a rent for the whole semester.
Yeah, I think we still have that system. It's called book bank system now, and
it's called the same.
Yeah, so you can borrow books from the library.
I'm sure you guys want to read only on all of your laptops, and I'm sure there's not a single bits guy without a laptop and a smartphone and whatnot, right? So I'm sure
especially in the online sense. Yeah.
Yeah. I told you I can't stop talking, so you have to stop me at some time. It's the fact that you take responsibility for yourself. There was no compulsory attendance. In fact, we also chose our own timetables, which these days people are saying, yeah, you can make your own timetable. That's a good thing in a modern university. But BITS was doing it in the 70s. You could make your own timetable based on a priority number that you get from the computer, and you pray that you get a good priority number so that you get all the best teachers, by folklore, that this is a great guy for this. Let's hunt for him. And if you do not get, then, there were classes where one teacher had 150 students sitting in his class and another teacher had 5. To me, it looks like, I feel sad about some of those things that we did. But it's just that, people said their reputations were built on, the way this guy taught something, he explains things very well. So people were sitting on window ledges in one teacher's class, and in the other class, in a huge lecture theater, there were just a lecture hall, there were just 5 people. So how do you explain this? You explain this because people said you have to learn the subject and you have to pass the exam. Where you learn from, how you learn is your problem. So we're challenging you to be responsible. It works in 2 ways. The people who could not handle the challenge or handle it well, the guys who handled it really well and were focused, they really did well. But it was also a temptation that you could always cover up later. Then you could do something, you could postpone things, you don't have to attend classes. So freedom is a double-edged thing, as you know. To be free is really difficult because you have to make decisions which are good for yourself and you have to stick to that. So nobody was making decisions for us. We had to make for ourselves.
It's so fun to know that even though a lot has changed, a lot of things have still remained common. Because I
hope the good things.
Yeah. We still pray to our PR board. We don't get answered very often.
One thing that has probably changed for the better, which I noticed over the years because I had other people going to BITS for their own degrees, was that I think the diversity. These days we are very, very aware of a balanced representation for all communities in any educational system. So the gender balance was totally skewed in the 70s and 80s and probably even the 90s. But BITS, I think, did something to address that very earlier than other people. And I do know that there were several girl students who would regularly, give the exam for the BITS programs and then get admitted. I think the gender ratio has certainly improved now.
So the thing is, I think around 2006 was when the BITS Act was enforced. I think the gender ratio kind of started to drop again because of that. Like before, when the 12th board exams used to define, entrance to BITS, that was where the gender ratio was kind of better off. But I think it's still we still have a long way to go for that.
But the gender balance thing is also to do with how the society is evolving or how the society is at a particular time. I think now more parents are willing to, encouraging their children to pursue anything that they like, irrespective of the gender. But from the time of, 1940 boys and 60 girls or 1900 boys and 100 girls, I think we have probably moved on from there for the better, right?
We have improved a lot.
Yeah, it's not 19 or 14, 16, but it's around 1:8 right now. 1:10, 1:8 is where.
But I'm sure it should improve more and more. Because as I'm on the other side, and I'm also asked various questions by different agencies and authorities that what are you doing about gender balance in physics, in improving diversity, not just gender balance, but also diversity. But gender is a big thing. And given that International Women's Day, we are particularly aware of that we should do something about getting more women into physics. And this is going across the whole world. The American Physical Society has several initiatives to foster this gender balance. And in India too, I think the changes are sort of sweeping. We are conscious that we do not handicap a section of people by maybe a system is working in a certain way that actually prevents some section from being a fair, an equal player on that ground. So these things, I think we are consciously making efforts to address, but we should do much more. I don't think we've done enough.
Yeah, I feel there's still, as Yashi said, there's still a long way to go.
Yeah, we're more conscious on the, women in STEM. In fact, I think even like yesterday and day before yesterday, a lot of our organizations in our, college did a lot of panel discussions where women from entrepreneurship and, a lot of other sectors came out and talked about this issue. And in just general, they talked about them. And I think that's great that we're kind of beginning the conversation, just not talking
I think, the fact that we've been sensitized and we are walking on the road implies that we will reach someday. We should, of course, walk faster. We should probably sprint towards the goal. But
Yeah.
I'm sure we will reach there as long as we are aware of the problem.